As students, you know our general education requirements include the humanities. Many students wonder why they should have to study the humanities at all, especially since they don't even know what the humanities entail. In this screencast, I would like to offer the briefest and broadest of definitions of the humanities, and also let you see why the humanities are relevant to almost any field of study. At the end of this screencast, I would like you to be able to enumerate at least 2 reasons for the study of humanities and offer a general explanation of the humanities. My goal is that this screencast will, at a very basic level, allow you to see the value of studying them. What do we mean when we talk about the humanities? Some people concentrate on the arts, but really the humanities cover a wide variety of disciplines that give us insight into the human condition throughout time. For example, religion, diverse cultures, literature, theater, music, architecture, dance, sculpture, comics, photography, languages, philosophy, and history are probably what most people today consider the humanities, although earlier thinkers had other ideas of what constituted them. Some people ask if anthropology, sports, culinary arts are part of the humanities. Here I would say no, and I would use my own very highly oversimplified reason for saying that. Remember I said that the humanities give insight into the human condition? I think things like food and sports offer insight into the condition of humans, rather than the human condition. What I mean by that, or sports and food, can answer questions about how tall people were or how quickly they could run. Perhaps we can answer what kind of food they ate and maybe how they prepared it. I think the humanities answer questions such as how did humans perceive themselves, their place in a culture, their place in a universe as it was conceived at any given moment. How did they express that condition through the arts, through their social structures, in their stories? The distinction is not precise, and there may be overlap with some disciplines not named in my definition, but at least such a distinction gives us some place to start a discussion. In fact, I think you'll find the humanities are connected to virtually every discipline.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. The first one, why would somebody in the nursing field want to learn about the humanities?
Humanities and nursing. Humanities and nursing go together because humanities teaches about diversity. Humanities teaches different cultural practices, different cultural beliefs, so nurses would be well suited to, they're going to run into a variety of patients, so humanities is going to help them develop those skills to deal with people from different cultures.
All right. How about somebody from the accounting field?
Why should somebody, or let's see, the connection between accounting and humanities, the reason we have humanities in the first place is because of accounting. And accounting starts because of beer, and we want to keep track of the beer. And for real, in the temples, they developed writing, and we have written literature and poems now because of accounting. We got an accounting system before we got our writing system.
That's true.
Yes. Yes. As we continue to consider the humanities, let's take a look at what some people have said about them. Kira Amstutz, President and CEO of the Indiana Humanities Council, gets to the crux of the problem of defining the humanities when she notes that it's not about what they are, it's about what they do. Tony Goldsby-Smith, writing for the Harvard Business Review, explains why those trained in the liberal arts and in the humanities may just be what big business needs to tackle more complex problems. Here are just 2 of the skills he believes studying the humanities builds. He says, people trained in the humanities who study Shakespeare's poetry or Cézanne's paintings have learned to play with the big concepts and to apply new ways of thinking to difficult problems that can't be analyzed in conventional ways. Jordan Weissman wrote in The Atlantic, quote, "Money is a pretty bad way to measure the value of a college major." This comment is supported by a later one from The Atlantic also, which reported that, quote, "Humanities and social science majors earn a similar amount as pre-professional majors do over a lifetime." Weissman goes on to explain that there is value in choosing an area of study that you truly care about. He says, quote, "There's something to be said for encouraging students to study something that they enjoy or have a natural talent for. Namely, they're more likely to stick to it." And later, Weissman notes, career-specific skills can be learned on the job, whereas critical thinking and problem-solving skills are invaluable benefits of a humanities education. Finally, a study done in January of 2008 by the Hart Research Associates notes that employers, quote, "feel that 5 areas of learning are in need of the most improvement for college graduates." The 5 areas of learning are adaptability, critical thinking, writing, self-direction, and global knowledge. How do we find these missing pieces? The humanities are a great tool for doing just that, because they offer practice in developing the soft skills.
So why should somebody in the criminal justice field study humanities?
Criminal justice and humanities are linked very early on by legal codes written down. You think about the Bible, but you can think long before the Bible. You have Hammurabi's Stele. There were some other written codes before that, but Hammurabi's Stele writes down, that's where we get the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But if you think about Confucius, Confucius says you don't need laws, you just need people to have virtue, and you have to teach them virtue. So you have to ask yourself what kind of legal system you want, punitive or reformative. And the other thing is that the Art Institute of Chicago started using introductory art courses to train police cadets because they thought police cadets observing paintings could actually be better at a crime scene and make better detailed observations and get more of a complete picture if they learned how to this detailed processing of analysis.
Okay. So I'm currently studying computer science. Why should somebody in the computer science field, or more broadly the technology field, study humanities?
You'll find this answer old and annoying, except that it's true, right?
Okay.
How are you going to communicate to somebody who doesn't speak computer code the ideas that you're trying to generate with your technological background? So part of humanities is teaching what we call the soft skills, or teaching this idea of communication. It's one thing to program, but you're going to use C++ the same way in situations, whereas the way you communicate what it is you've created with C++ is a very different skill.
So you're saying that the humanities will provide a sort of medium for the people trying to communicate what it is that they're portraying in their programming languages?
Correct.
People that wouldn't understand. Okay.
Correct, yeah. It facilitates that discussion, yes.
Why would someone in horticulture or automotive technology be interested in studying the humanities?
Horticulture and automotive, those are so vastly different, but if you think about the history of the garden, that is all about the aesthetics, and you think about our gardens now and how they were sort of based on farming practices, but before that, right, the French were trying to control geometry and space and nature by how artistic their gardens were and how laid out they were, and that's all about an artistic aesthetic. And the British were saying, we must let nature show us the way, and so we have very different philosophies of gardening, and that, I think, is based on people's beliefs about aesthetic and nature, and I think the humanities is a gateway into talking about those different beliefs about aesthetics and beauty. And automotive, really, what I think about automotive is this idea of NAFTA, and that automotive work is now international. First of all, the cars that we decide we don't want anymore go to Africa, right? But also we have NAFTA, so we're on a market with any manufacturing thing, right? We're on a market with Canada and Mexico, and many of our parts come from other parts of the world, and so we have to know how to negotiate cultural norms, cultural negotiations. So our earliest mode of transportation was, I guess, animals and feet, right? But the Sumerians, right, the great mathematicians, were obsessed by the circle, and all their art is cylindrical based, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, we should roll that log down a hill and put an axle in it. So the wheel goes all the way back to our history, and that's a sort of a humanities relation, but you have to put that in the context of the Sumerians and their obsession with circles and finally getting that wheel to us.
Let's take a look at what MBA and Wharton graduate Lee Hahn says in her blog post when she explains the soft skills and the hard skills. She notes that for the hard skills, the rules stay the same regardless of the company for which you work, the circumstances in which you work, or the people with whom you work. For example, programming is a hard skill. The rules for creating the best code to do a function are the same regardless of where you work. Soft skills, however, are self-management skills and people skills, where the rules change depending on the company and culture in which you work and the people with whom you work. Communication skills, for example, are a set of soft skills. The rules for how to be effective at communication change and depend on your audience and the content you are communicating. If we consider the soft skills and how valuable they are to the workplace, you can see that the humanities are an underlying force of almost any discipline. They help you develop the skills you need to change and adapt at your workplace, and they give you the tools to describe your own human condition.
So the question was, why should a scientist study the humanities? So if you think about chemistry, physics, Einstein was reading philosophers when he was also pondering the question of time and the question of challenging Newton's ideas. And if you think about physics, Richard Feynman has this lovely, wonderful lecture on beauty and how science and beauty come together. And that aesthetics is one thing, but science can actually help you appreciate and see a different level of beauty. But you understand Feynman's talking about beauty, so he has to have studied aesthetics and thought about it. Feynman himself was a painter. Biology, we've talked a little bit about that in terms of ethical treatment, and biology often comes up against ethical issues. So humanities deal with all of those things and help people gain a framework for debating and questioning ideas. The other question that was asked is, why would an economist or a banker need to study the humanities? And I think the best reason is given by Jeffrey Harpum, who says, money's a fiction. What better way to teach people about fiction than to have them study the humanities, literature? And he talks about how in the economic crisis, the mathematical models might have been right, but they left out the human factor. And so we ended up with an economic crisis that many people didn't predict. So the humanities touch everything, underlie everything.